Hi everyone, this is Rachel at StudioUs with another at-home drawing tutorial for you guys. Today we're going to take on a colored pencil jellyfish, so go ahead and grab your supplies and we'll get started. First things first, we're going to need a blank piece of paper as well as a drawing pencil, a Sharpie marker, and a large eraser to clear off our pencil lines at the end. To start things off, we're going to start with the top of the jellyfish, so I'm going to break my paper in half horizontally, going a little up from that halfway mark and leaving about an inch from the top. I'm going to mark out my top, bottom, and sides for the top of my jellyfish. Notice that I've marked the sides a little lower, so the widest part is lower on that shape than, the middle of the shape if we were drawing an oval. So I want to scooch that down a little bit. And after that, just kind of draw it in. Should be a little bit pointed at the top, but still with a rounded edge, and then curved like an oval at the bottom. Within that shape, we're going to get this wavy front portion of our jellyfish. And I'm just keeping track of how many waves. It looks like we've got 4 there. So I kind of dot them out, watching where it starts and ends, and drawing it. Next, we're starting our jellyfish tentacles. So I'm going to look at where on that wavy line we just drew the tentacle starts and how far out it goes. Also looking carefully at how much is inside the shape versus how much is outside the shape. Sketch those 2 in. And to get this pattern inside the jellyfish, I'm going to start with the middle shape. It's just a long, rounded, upside down V shape. And then working on either side, I'm going to curve those V shapes around to the side so they kind of slant out. Add one more whole one, and then about a half of one going up to the edge of the jellyfish on either side. And notice that the center one is the tallest, and then they get a little bit shorter each time you work out. Got one little line to erase, so we're going to clear that out between our jellyfish tentacles. Now we're on to the tricky part. So I'm going to dot this out as I go. And what I want to do is look for anywhere there's a twist. So coming down from where we started, it kind of scoops down, does a switch back, and loops around. We get a curve going out, going in, and going out. I'm looking for the relative shapes of these things. So keeping track of how many curves there are and where they land in relation to each other. So they're pretty tightly packed up at the top, and then they get bigger as we work down. And once I've got those all dotted out, I can just follow along with my dots and sketch my line in. If you need to make any corrections, you can correct just one bump at a time. It makes it a little easier than trying to draw the whole thing all at once. This next one kind of switches over. So our first wiggly line kind of came straight down. This one we're getting the same curves, but they're angling in to reconnect with that other line. So same process, I'm going to keep track of how many curves there are and about where they hit, and try to aim right for where I see that line connecting with our first squiggly jellyfish body line. Once we've got it dotted out, we can draw it in, and these are just kind of like switchbacky curves. Along the bottom, we're going to fill in some body to make this look like a more solid shape. So I'm just doing a little extra line between those waves to make it look like it's got some depth. Alright, for our tentacles, I'm going to mark out anywhere I see that line crossing over a piece that we already have drawn in. So I mark where it starts, ends, anywhere it crosses over a line, and then I draw it in. Same with the line down here, I marked where it started, where it crosses over, how far out it goes, and then I sketch it in. And same process on the other side, looking at where it starts, which bump it comes out of, where it crosses over, and on which bump it crosses over, and how far out those bumps go. So dotting these out, looking at how close together those ends come, clean up any little extra bits, and then we can draw it in. It's always helpful to use what you've already drawn to help guide what you're drawing in on the next step. That way everything kind of stays within proportion to itself. Even if the shape is a little off right from the get-go, it'll still look great. So we're going to double up these lines. I've already got my line drawn in, so I can just kind of follow along, make it a little thicker, and then taper it off at the end. Do that same process on the other side. Looking at where they cross over and kind of switch. Notice that I'm switching back and forth. On one side it goes outside, on the other it goes inside. And that's going to create the illusion that this is kind of a twisty, narrow tentacle that's twisting back and forth as it bends. Any line that crosses over those two tentacles that we just drew, erase those out. Alright, going back to the body of our jellyfish, just to make it look like it's got a little more density to it, we're going to add a few lines to create the illusion of like a folding, almost fabric-like texture to the body of this jellyfish. And they should all angle up and point toward the very center of the jellyfish's head. Alright, looks good. Little line touch up there. And after that, wherever we have a curve coming into the jellyfish's body, we're going to put a little line coming up just to add even more depth and create that kind of fabric, wavy texture. Alright, we're going to create the little gills inside the jellyfish's head. I don't think jellyfish have gills inside their head, but this is just kind of a texture effect. Looks a little bit like the gills on a mushroom. And finally, we are adding in the bubbles. So I like to start with the bubbles at the top of the page since those are bigger. And I'm going to keep track of where these bubbles are going and the relative size of them. So some are much bigger, some are a little smaller. Got one going off the page up at the top. Finish out my big bubbles up on the top portion of the paper, and then we'll start working downward. If you want to, you can kind of just sketch in some bubbles as you like them. I like to kind of follow along and see if I can get them exactly the way I have on my reference. And to do that, I usually set them up in groups of 3 or 4. So you can see I did a group of 3 up at the top. There's a little group of 4 underneath that kind of look like a little patch together. There's these 2 larger ones, and then a couple little ones at the bottom. So I always look for little groupings of small objects, and that kind of helps break up the dauntingness of having lots and lots of bubbles to draw in. It also helps make sure that you're spacing things out and getting a nice even balance of big and small bubbles as you work your way around. Get these last couple sets of bubbles drawn in. A little group of 3 up at the top there. And we've got it. So our drawing is all done. You can grab your Sharpie marker and carefully trace over all of your pencil lines. One of the only places we had to erase anything was in these forward tentacles that we drew. So I'm going to draw those in first. That way I know not to put any Sharpie lines through those parts, just in case I missed some erasing or didn't really get a good thorough erase on any of those crossover lines. Once we've got that in, you can kind of just work around, get the rest of the lines on your jellyfish, and don't forget to do all the bubbles. Alright, with our Sharpie lines done, we can grab our large eraser, clear off all the pencil underneath our Sharpie lines, and get ready to color. So to start everything out, I'm going to start with a dark blue colored pencil and fill in all of my background. So I'm going to carefully kind of work around and outline my edges as I go. Well, we have so many details on this picture, it's kind of easier to just work around in small pieces one at a time and really just fill around in all of those edges. So take your time, be patient. This part takes a little while because you've got to work around lots of little details. And make sure you're looking out for any spaces in between the jellyfish body and the tentacles where you might need to fill in blue as well. All right, background is finally done. We can move on to our bubbles. So I'm going to grab a light blue this time. And for each of the bubbles, you can see there's a little white highlight on them. So I'm going to mark that out and then fill in the rest of the bubble. So you can see I've left out a little highlight and then filled the rest in. If you forget your highlight on one of the bubbles, you can always grab an eraser and just clear that off. And go ahead and finish up all of your other bubbles. Alright, bubbles are looking good. So I'm going to take a darker kind of turquoisey blue and just get a little bit of a shadow along the bottom of each of those bubbles. And you can see it goes on the opposite side of where that white shine is and just goes right along the bottom edge. And we can use that same dark turquoisey blue to color in those darker blue spots on the jellyfish's body where you see that kind of fold over on the body pieces. Look carefully for any spots. Work up that other side looking for spots as well. Looking good. So I'm going to take a light turquoisey blue and just very lightly shade in anywhere where I see a light blue color on the jellyfish's body. So it's kind of going up against those outside edges of the wavy folds. And you can see there's a little bit of white as a highlight where that fold kind of hits its peak. So I'm leaving out the white area and just coloring in the blue area. I'm going a little bigger than I see it on the paper, that way I can overlay some of the purple and get those colors to blend together later. So really carefully look for any of those lighter blue spots on the jellyfish's body. Next we'll grab a yellow. I'm going to go ahead and color in just the outside half of those long twisty tentacles. After that, I'm going to use kind of a golden yellow or a light orange and fill in the other half of those tentacles so that we have a yellow side and an orange side. I can also use that light gold yellow to get the highlight up at the top of the jellyfish's head. After that, I'm going to use a red orange and very lightly shade in the rest of the jellyfish's head. You can see I'm leaving lots of kind of white texture space throughout that space. And what we're going to do is layer over that gold yellow color again, and that'll bring it together and mix nicely to create that kind of pale red orange. After that, I can go back in with my red orange and get the shadows along the orange parts on the bottom of the jellyfish's head. Next, we'll use a pink and we're going to color in those nice pointy stripes on the jellyfish. Using a coral, we can fill in the little gilly parts inside the jellyfish's head. Then going back in with a red orange, we can build in the shadows, leaving just the edge, that coral pink color. And I'm going to use a mahogany or a brown and get those very inside shadows up along that top edge. Next, we can use a red purple or a red violet color and build up those shadows inside the pointy triangles on the top of the jellyfish. And I'm using a darker purple to get some of those extra darkest shadows. Using that same purple, I can very lightly go in and shade in all the purple areas on the body, overlapping a little bit with the blue so that it blends together. At this point, anything that's white on the jellyfish's body that's not one of those highlights we left out, we can color in purple. And I'm going to push a little bit harder to build up that darker purple right at the top. And to finish things off, I'm going to take the darkest purple I have and go even darker right up at the top. And after that, we'll have our jellyfish. Hope you guys had a great time, and we'll see you for the next one.